So in the United States, it's always been socialized as important for there to be marriage. Okay, that's literally been the foundation for quite some time. But we have to understand why the push for marriage even exists. And I think that for those that are within, my generation and even past generations, especially women, have been told that their whole preparation is for marriage. From a very young age, women are told in making decisions to consider the fact that they're going to be a mother, the fact that they're going to be a wife, and things of that nature, right? But we have to understand this socialized ideology of what women are supposed to be doing and why it actually existed, and also why a lot of women went along with it. In recent history, crazy enough, women didn't have a lot of freedoms. They didn't have a lot of liberties within their own independent self, which meant that they could not work, which meant that they could not provide for themselves, which meant that they could not go to school to be educated. They could not own land. They cannot own bank accounts. And so essentially, if you are born into this Americanized world about 30, 40, 50 years ago, you could not exist independently within yourself as a woman. And so in order for you to be able to navigate this world, you had to be married. And the reason why you had to be married is because all of these things became a possibility for you upon being married and changing your name. It is very important that your name is changed. Why should you have to change your name? It's because they knew what man you belonged to. So if you were not married, they knew that you belonged to your father based off of your last name. If you were married, they knew that you belonged to your husband based off of the name change. Now, if you were too old and you still hadn't made a name, they knew that you were unmarried and was an old woman, an old maid, so to speak. And during those times, those women were considered undesirables. They were considered the harder population to marry because they got older. And I never really thought about why that was, but I think that's an interesting concept to think that somebody getting older all of a sudden makes them unmarriable. But I do believe that it also had something to do with procreation and them being able to have kids. Now, the role that you were supposed to play as a woman was supposed to tend to the family, tend to the house, and tend to the husband. That was your goal. That's what you were born for. And that was your role. To be seen and not heard, to be attractive, to be a cook, to be a homemaker, to make sure that everyone in the household got everything that they needed, while also ensuring that you were raising your daughters to do the same. Why is this understanding of the socialization of marriage in America's not so distant past very important? It's because of something called the SAVE Act. Okay. Now, this act is something that's relatively new, and there's been a lot of newspaper articles and online articles about it because it has women in an uproar, as it should. Now, the Republican Party puts forth this act or this bill as something that's going to be able to help protect voters and voting from illegals being able to vote in our elections. Well, the reality is that illegals are not voting in our elections. Also, another reality is the fact that Russia has been influencing our elections, and yet this administration has discontinued safeguards to stop them. But I digress. Going back to the SAVE Act. Essentially, what this says is that for those that have a name change, and when you are registering to vote, you must show proof of the name. There are a lot of people that change their names that do not have a birth certificate showing proof of the change of name. Predominantly women. Because millions of women change their name all the time. Now, if you're asking me for my own 2 cents, should I get married? I won't be changing my name. It'll be hyphenated. Okay, so that means I can go by my maiden name or I can go by my married name. But there will be no name changes, and that's just partially because of the paperwork and the money. Too expensive. It's too much stuff going on. You got to notify too many people. It gets exhausting, but I digress. Okay. And so basically what would this then do? It creates a barrier to married women to being able to vote. And why is this a problem? Well, you have the Republican agenda that is currently headed by white nationalists that sees that the family unit is being torn apart because women are becoming more liberated and they're becoming more liberal, and therefore they're speaking out and doing things that are different than what their husbands would say that they should be doing. This is their way of being able to stop that. And they purport it underneath the guise of illegals are voting in our election. And that's not really the case. And it's very, very odd that they would put forth this report being that Donald Trump was elected. So if the voting gets you your desired outcome, and then you put forth this act or this bill to be able to stop that because it's illegals that voted me in and illegals shouldn't be voting. And this doesn't really make much sense. But I urge you to be able to pay attention to the legislation that's currently trying to be passed by the Republican Party, because it's doing things to be able to silence the population. And it's also doing things that's going to pull a wool over your eyes if you're not aware and if you're not informed.